The galaxy had known peace for exactly 47 standard cycles when the Kethvar emerged from the void between stars. They came not as explorers or traders, but as something far worse. The first ships that encountered them simply vanished. No distress signals, no final transmissions, just empty space where proud vessels once flew. Commander Zex Tai of the Galactic Defense Coalition stood before the massive holographic display in the war room aboard the flagship Time's Eternal Resolve Asterisk. The three-dimensional map showed the Outer Rim territories, once bustling with trade routes and mining operations. Now, over 60% of the sector glowed an ominous red. Kethvar controlled space. They move like shadows, reported Intelligence Officer Velmar, her blue-scaled hands dancing across the control interface. Our scouts report sightings, then lose contact within hours. Whatever technology they possess, it surpasses our understanding. Zex Tai's four eyes narrowed as he studied the tactical data. The Kethvar weren't just another aggressive species seeking territory. They were apex predators who had perfected the art of warfare across millennia. Their ships phased in and out of normal space, striking without warning before disappearing like ghosts. Their weapons cut through Coalition shields as if they were made of paper. "Sir, incoming priority transmission from High Command," announced Communications Specialist Rix Oba from his station. The hologram shifted, displaying the weathered face of Admiral Krondesh. Dark circles rimmed his eyes, and his usually pristine uniform showed signs of extended wear. "Commander Zex Tai, I'll be direct. The Kethvar have broken through our defensive lines at Sector 7. They're moving toward the core worlds. We have perhaps 10 standard rotations before they reach civilian populations." Zex Tai felt his heart sink. Sector 7 had been fortified with their most advanced defenses. If the Kethvar had overwhelmed those positions, nowhere in Coalition space was safe. "What are your orders, Admiral?" Zex Tai asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Evacuation protocols are already active on the outer colonies. Your mission is to buy time. Hold them at the Nexus Point chokehold for as long as possible. Every hour you delay their advance saves millions of lives." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in heavy silence. Everyone present understood the implications. The Nexus Point was a natural bottleneck in hyperspace lanes, forcing all traffic through a relatively small area of normal space. It was the perfect place for a last stand, which meant it was also the perfect place to die. "Tactical analysis, please," Zex Tai requested. Lieutenant Jorhan activated the combat projections. "Sir, we have 17 Coalition vessels of various classes. The Kethvar advance force consists of at least 30 confirmed ships, possibly more. Their technology allows them to phase shift during combat, making accurate targeting extremely difficult. Weapons effectiveness? Minimal, sir. Our plasma cannons and photon torpedoes have shown a 12% hit ratio against phased targets. Even direct hits seem to cause limited damage to their hull materials." Zex Tai closed his eyes, accessing the tactical databases downloaded into his command implants. The Kethvar had been mentioned in ancient texts as the Void Hunters, a species that had reportedly consumed entire civilizations before disappearing into dark space. Most scholars had dismissed these accounts as mythology. Now it seemed the myths were terrifyingly real. "Commander," Velmar called out, her voice tight with concern. "Long-range sensors are detecting massive hyperspace disturbances. Something big is coming our way." The main display updated, showing energy signatures unlike anything in Coalition databases. The readings suggested ships of enormous size, far larger than anything the Coalition had ever constructed. As they watched, contact indicators began appearing on the tactical grid. First 10, then 20, then 50. "By the 7 moons," whispered Jorhan. "Sir, I'm reading over 100 vessels of unknown configuration. They're maintaining formation just outside the system's edge." Zex Tai studied the display, his tactical mind working through possibilities. The Kethvar weren't rushing forward as they had in previous encounters. They were positioning themselves, preparing for something. But what? "Sir, receiving a transmission," reported Rix Oba. "It's on an open channel, but the signal source appears to be coming from empty space." "Put it through," The voice that filled the bridge was unlike anything they had heard before. It spoke in perfect coalition standard, but the tone carried undertones that seemed to reach directly into their minds, triggering primal fears that evolution had bred into their species. Coalition forces. You have witnessed the futility of resistance. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your shields cannot protect you. Your courage means nothing against inevitable extinction. We are HFY. We are the end of all things. Surrender, and your deaths will be swift. The transmission ended, but the psychological impact lingered. HFY could see his crew struggling to maintain composure. The HFY weren't just technologically superior. They were psychological warfare experts who understood how to break an enemy's will to fight. All stations, report status, HFY ordered, forcing authority into his voice. One by one, his officers confirmed their readiness, though he could hear the strain in their responses. They were brave beings, trained for combat and dedicated to protecting innocent lives. But they were facing an enemy that seemed to exist beyond the normal rules of warfare. "Commander," Velmar said quietly, "there's something else. I'm detecting energy readings from deeper in the system. Something's already here." The tactical display updated, showing a single contact drifting in the shadow of asteroid field Delta 7. The energy signature was almost negligible, barely registering on their sensors. In the chaos of preparing for the HFY assault, they had missed it completely. "Classification?" HFY asked. "Unknown, sir. The signature doesn't match any vessel in our databases. It's small, approximately the size of a single pilot fighter, but the hull composition is unlike anything we've encountered." "Could it be HFY?" "Negative, sir. The energy patterns are completely different. This ship appears to be using technology we've never seen before." HFY made a decision that would later prove to be one of the most important of his career. "Open a communication channel to the unknown vessel." "Channel open, sir. Unknown vessel. This is Commander HFY of the Galactic Defense Coalition. Please identify yourself and state your intentions." For a long moment, only static filled the channel. Then, a new voice responded. It was calm, measured, and distinctly different from anything they had heard before. The speaker used Coalition standard, but the accent was unfamiliar. "Coalition forces. This is Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen, United Earth Defense Corps. I've been tracking the hostiles for approximately 6 weeks. Request permission to assist in defensive operations." The bridge fell silent. Earth was a mythical world spoken of in ancient databases, supposedly the origin point of several species that had scattered across the galaxy millions of cycles ago. Most xenobiologists believed it was a legend, a common origin myth shared by multiple civilizations. "Earth?" Velmar whispered. "But that's impossible. Earth is just a story." Sergeant Chen," HFY said carefully, "please clarify your species and homeworld." "Human, from Sol System, Terra." "I know this is probably confusing, but we can discuss xenobiology later. Right now, you have about 100 very angry space pirates getting ready to turn this system into a graveyard. I suggest we focus on the immediate problem." Before HFY could respond, the HFY fleet began moving. The tactical display showed the massive formation advancing toward the nexus point, their ships phasing in and out of normal space in a pattern that defied Coalition understanding of physics. "All ships, battle stations," HFY commanded. "Prepare for engagement." The Coalition vessels formed a defensive line across the hyperspace choke point, 17 ships against over 100. The odds were impossible, but they would fight anyway. It was what they had sworn to do. "Sergeant Chen," HFY transmitted, "if you truly wish to assist, we welcome any help you can provide." "Copy that, Commander. I'll be operating independently. Try not to shoot at the small ship doing impossible things." "That'll be me." The first HFY ships dropped out of phase shift, materializing within weapon range. They were sleek, organic-looking vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. As the Coalition watched, weapon ports opened along their hulls, revealing technology that glowed with malevolent energy. "All ships, open fire," Zextai ordered. The space between the fleets erupted with weapons fire. Coalition plasma cannons and photon torpedoes streaked across the void, only to pass harmlessly through Kethvar ships that shifted out of phase at the last second. The aliens' return fire was devastatingly accurate, striking Coalition shields with weapons that seemed to ignore conventional defensive measures. The first Coalition ship, the heavy cruiser Times Stalwart Guardian Asterisk, exploded in a brilliant flash as Kethvar weapons overloaded its reactor core. Then the destroyer Times Swift Strike Times went dark, its hull punctured by energy beams that cut through reinforced plating like it was vapor. "Sir, we're losing ships too quickly," Jorhan reported. "Our weapons can't maintain target locks when they phase shift." "Continue firing," Zextai ordered. "We have to hold the line." That was when everything changed. A single energy beam, impossibly precise and blindingly bright, lanced out from the asteroid field. It struck the largest Kethvar vessel amidships, punching through whatever phasing technology protected it and opening a massive hole in its hull. The alien ship shuddered, atmosphere venting from the breach, and slowly began listing to one side. "What was that?" Velmar gasped. "Tracking the beam source," Jorhan replied. "It came from the unknown human vessel." "Sir, I don't understand how that's possible. The weapon yield suggests a capital ship cannon, but the energy signature came from a single pilot fighter." Another beam flashed across space, this one striking a Kethvar destroyer that had been phasing in and out of reality to avoid Coalition fire. The beam seemed to anticipate exactly where the ship would materialize, hitting it at the precise moment it became solid. The destroyer's bow section simply ceased to exist, and the rest of the ship tumbled helplessly through space. The Kethvar formation wavered. For the first time since the war began, the alien fleet showed signs of confusion. Ships that had been advancing with mechanical precision began taking evasive action, their formation becoming ragged as they tried to locate the source of the devastating attacks. "Commander," Chen's voice came over the communication channel. "I need you to create a distraction. Draw their attention to your position while I reposition for better shots." "Understood," Zextai replied. "All ships, advance to attack formation Theta. Concentrate fire on the lead elements." The Coalition vessels surged forward, their weapons blazing. The Kethvar responded as expected, focusing their attention on the obvious threat while seeming to dismiss the lone fighter as a minor concern. It was a tactical error that would cost them dearly. Chen's ship moved through space like nothing the Coalition had ever seen. It didn't follow conventional flight patterns or obey normal physics. Instead, it seemed to dance between dimensions, appearing and disappearing in ways that made the Kethvar phasing technology look primitive by comparison. More importantly, its weapons never missed. Each shot was perfect. Not accurate, not precise, but perfect. The energy beams struck targets at impossible ranges, threading through the gaps in defensive formations to hit critical systems with surgical accuracy. Command bridges exploded. Weapon arrays went dark. Engine sections vented plasma as containment fields failed. Within minutes, the Kethvar fleet had lost over 20 vessels. The survivors began a fighting retreat, their formation completely broken as they tried to avoid the impossible shots that came from seemingly empty space. "Sir," Rixoba announced, "the Kethvar are transmitting on multiple frequencies. It sounds like coordination chatter, but I'm also detecting what might be distress calls." For the first time in 47 standard cycles, the galaxy's apex predators were afraid. "Sergeant Chen," Zextai transmitted, "your assistance has been extraordinary. How is this level of precision possible?" "Training, Commander. Lots and lots of training. Plus some equipment advantages that would take too long to explain right now. The important thing is that these aren't the unbeatable monsters they pretend to be. They just haven't met anyone willing to take the time to study their patterns and find the weaknesses." The remaining Kethvar vessels executed a full retreat, phasing back into hyperspace and fleeing toward the outer rim. For the first time since the war began, a Coalition force had not only survived contact with the enemy, but had driven them off completely. "All ships, report damage and casualties," Zextai ordered. As his crews began their assessments, he found himself studying the tactical recordings of the engagement. The human pilot had demonstrated capabilities that challenged everything the Coalition understood about warfare, physics, and the limits of individual combat effectiveness. "Sergeant Chen," he transmitted, "would you consider joining us for a tactical debriefing? I believe we have much to discuss." Copy that, Commander. I'll dock with your ship. But I should warn you, my story is going to sound pretty unbelievable. Humans have been out here longer than you might think, and we've learned some things about dealing with bullies." As Chen's small ship approached the Time's Eternal Resolve asterisk, Zextai realized that the galaxy had just changed forever. The Keithvar had ruled through fear and technological superiority, but they had never encountered a species that viewed impossible odds as merely another tactical problem to solve. The war was far from over, but for the first time since it began, victory seemed possible. Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen stood in the main conference room aboard the Time's Eternal Resolve asterisk, her dark eyes scanning the assembled Coalition officers with calm assessment. She was smaller than most beings present, her lean frame clothed in what appeared to be a simple black flight suit. Yet something about her presence made even the veteran commanders sit straighter in their chairs. "Before we begin," Commander Zextai said, "I must ask about your remarkable shooting display. Our tactical computers recorded over 40 direct hits, with 0 misses. In 3 decades of military service, I've never witnessed such precision." Chen's expression remained neutral. "What did your computers tell you about my targeting solutions?" Lieutenant Jorhan consulted his datapad. "According to our analysis, several of your shots were physically impossible. You hit targets that were phase-shifted, anticipating their materialization points with perfect accuracy. The mathematics suggest you were calculating hyperspace physics in real time. Hyperspace physics are actually pretty straightforward once you understand the underlying patterns," Chen replied matter-of-factly. "Phase shifting isn't true dimensional displacement. It's more like controlled quantum tunneling. The exit points follow predictable mathematical sequences if you know what to look for." The Coalition officers exchanged glances. Velmar leaned forward, her scaled features showing intense curiosity. "Sergeant, our best scientists have studied Kethvar technology for cycles without making such breakthroughs. How did humans achieve this understanding?" Chen was quiet for a moment, as if considering how much to reveal. "Because we've been fighting them for longer than you realize. The Kethvar weren't always confined to your section of space. They've been moving through the galaxy for millennia, consuming civilizations and growing stronger. Humanity encountered them approximately 200 years ago." 200 years? Zextai's 4 eyes widened. "But that would mean that humans have been engaged in an extended conflict with your apex predators while your coalition was enjoying peace," Chen confirmed. "We've learned their patterns, studied their technology, and developed countermeasures. What you witnessed today was the result of 2 centuries of very expensive education." Rixoba consulted his xenobiology database. "Our records indicate that Earth-origin species scattered across the galaxy millions of cycles ago. But contemporary human civilization? There's no evidence of spacefaring human cultures in our databases." That's intentional," Chen said. "Humans have a saying. The best way to win a war is to make your enemy think you don't exist. We've been very careful about our galactic footprint. Observation posts, listening stations, intelligence-gathering operations. We've been watching and learning while staying invisible." She activated a small device on her belt, and the conference room's holographic display shifted to show a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. Hundreds of small indicators appeared throughout previously empty space, showing human installations scattered across multiple sectors. "This is why you've never detected us," Chen continued. "Human technology prioritizes stealth and efficiency over size and power. We don't build massive fleets or establish visible colonies. We create networks of small, highly mobile units that can operate independently for extended periods." Intelligence Officer Velmar studied the display with growing amazement. "These positions suggest a surveillance network covering nearly half the galaxy. The coordination required for such an operation would be enormous." "Not really," Humans are good at working independently while maintaining shared objectives. Each unit operates autonomously but shares intelligence through quantum communication networks. It's decentralized warfare doctrine taken to its logical conclusion. Commander Zextai focused on the tactical implications. Sergeant, if humanity has been fighting the Kethvar for 2 centuries, why are you here alone? Where is the human fleet? Chen's expression grew grim. Because this isn't our fight. The Kethvar have learned to avoid human space after some very costly encounters. They've shifted their expansion toward coalition territory because you represent easier targets. My presence here is unofficial. Unofficial? Human command doesn't believe direct intervention is strategically advisable. The Kethvar are a known quantity to us now. We've contained their expansion in our direction and established defensive perimeters they can't penetrate. From a purely logical standpoint, allowing them to engage coalition forces serves human strategic interests. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Yorhan was the first to speak. You're saying humanity could stop the Kethvar advance, but chooses not to intervene? Officially, yes. Unofficially, Chen met each officer's gaze in turn. Some of us believe that policy is short-sighted. The galaxy is a big place, but it's not infinite. Eventually, isolated threats become everyone's problem. So you're here against orders, Zextai concluded. I'm here on extended reconnaissance patrol with broad operational discretion. How I choose to interpret my mission parameters is between me and my conscience. Velmar leaned back in her chair, processing the implications. Sergeant, you mentioned that humans have developed countermeasures against Kethvar technology. Are you willing to share that information? Some of it. The basic physics principles behind phase shifting aren't classified. More advanced countermeasures would require approval from higher authorities. Which brings us back to the official non-intervention policy. Chen walked to the holographic display and manipulated the controls with practiced ease. The image shifted to show a detailed schematic of Kethvar ship construction. The key to understanding their technology is recognizing that they're not as advanced as they appear. The Kethvar are scavengers who've spent millennia absorbing conquered civilizations. Their ships are amalgamations of different technologies, which creates both strengths and weaknesses. She highlighted specific sections of the ship design. Phase shifting requires enormous energy expenditure. They can't maintain it indefinitely, and they can't use other high-power systems while phased. More importantly, the quantum tunneling effect creates predictable distortion patterns in local spacetime. You mean their phasing technology actually makes them easier to track? Jorhan asked. Once you know what to look for. Human sensors are calibrated to detect quantum fluctuations. We can track phased vessels and predict their emergence points with reasonable accuracy. Your sensors aren't equipped for this type of detection, but the principles could be adapted to coalition technology. Commander Zextai saw the strategic possibilities immediately. If we could track their movements during phase shift, we could position our forces to engage them when they materialize. Exactly. But there's more. Phase shifting also creates vulnerability windows. For approximately 2.3 seconds during materialization, their defensive systems are completely offline. A precisely timed shot during that window will penetrate their hulls regardless of armor strength. The coalition officers absorbed this information with growing excitement. For the first time since the war began, they were learning about exploitable weaknesses rather than cataloging additional Kethvar advantages. Sergeant, Velmar said carefully, would you be willing to assist in training our personnel? Even basic knowledge transfer could significantly improve our combat effectiveness. Chen considered the request. I can provide theoretical framework and observational techniques, but effective implementation requires extensive practice. My species has advantages that might not translate directly to coalition forces. What kind of advantages? Humans evolved on a high-gravity world with an unusually active electromagnetic field. Our reaction times and spatial processing capabilities are optimized for complex three-dimensional combat environments. We also have some neurological peculiarities that affect how we process probability calculations. Rixoba consulted his database again. According to our xenobiology files, species from high-gravity worlds typically develop enhanced muscular density and bone structure. But faster neural processing? Earth wasn't just high gravity. It was an actively hostile environment. Multiple predator species, frequent natural disasters, and extreme weather variations. Humans are the products of millions of years of evolutionary pressure that rewarded quick thinking and adaptability over specialization. Chen activated another display, showing comparative neurological scans. Human brains are structured differently than most coalition species. We have redundant processing centers and enhanced pattern recognition capabilities. When I'm calculating targeting solutions, I'm using cognitive architecture that evolved to track multiple fast-moving threats simultaneously. This explains your combat performance, Zextai mused. But it also suggests that human tactical doctrine might not be directly applicable to our forces. True, but the underlying principles are sound. You can't match human reaction times, but you can learn to recognize the patterns that make prediction possible. Your computers can handle the mathematical calculations if they're programmed with the correct algorithms. Lieutenant Yorhan looked up from his tactical analyses. Sergeant, I'm reviewing the engagement recordings. Your ship's performance characteristics are unlike anything in our databases. The acceleration rates and maneuvering profiles suggest technology far beyond current coalition capabilities. Human engineering philosophy differs from coalition approaches. You build large, durable platforms with multiple redundant systems. Humans prefer small, efficient designs with minimal signatures and maximum maneuverability. Different solutions to the same problems. But your weapons yield is the result of focused energy delivery rather than raw power. Human weapons use quantum focal arrays to concentrate energy at the target point, rather than simply projecting maximum force. It's more efficient and produces better penetration characteristics. Chen moved to another section of the holographic display, showing weapon schematics that made several officers gasp in recognition. The principles are based on coalition science, actually. Your researchers developed most of the underlying theories. You just never applied them to weapons development because your tactical doctrine emphasizes sustained firepower over precision strikes. Velmar studied the technical readouts with growing understanding. These designs could be adapted to our existing platforms. The modifications would be extensive, but theoretically possible, with significant training adjustments. Human weapons require precise targeting calculation and split-second timing. Miss the optimal firing window, and you waste the shot entirely. Your gunners would need to completely relearn their profession. Commander Zextai stood and paced to the observation port, looking out at his battered fleet. 3 ships lost, 7 more damaged, against an enemy that had previously been untouchable. The humans' intervention had turned certain defeat into unexpected victory, but the broader war was far from over. Sergeant Chen, he said finally, I must ask directly. Will you remain to assist in our defensive operations? For a while. My ship requires some maintenance, and I need to file reports with Human Command about Kethvar tactical developments. But I can't stay indefinitely, and I can't guarantee additional human support. What would it take to gain official human intervention? Chen's expression became carefully neutral. Humans don't respond well to requests for help. We prefer to identify problems and develop our own solutions. If you want human attention, you need to prove that this conflict affects human interests. How do we do that? By demonstrating that you can fight effectively with minimal support. Humans respect competence and self-reliance. Show us that you're capable of adapting and improving, and attitudes might change. The meeting continued for several more hours, with Chen providing detailed briefings on Kethvar tactics, technology, and strategic patterns. The coalition officers absorbed every piece of information, recognizing that they were receiving intelligence worth decades of traditional reconnaissance efforts. As the session concluded, Zextai found himself both hopeful and concerned. The human's knowledge could revolutionize coalition defensive capabilities, but her presence also revealed how unprepared they were for galactic-scale conflicts. One final question, he said as Chen prepared to leave. In your assessment, can the coalition win this war? Chen paused at the doorway. her dark eyes reflecting calculations that seemed to encompass variables beyond normal tactical considerations. That depends entirely on how quickly you can learn to think like predators instead of prey. The Kethvar have ruled through fear and technological intimidation for millennia. They've never faced opponents who refuse to be intimidated. Today's engagement proved they can be hurt. Whether they can be defeated depends on your willingness to become something they don't understand. And what would that be? Dangerous. 3 standard rotations after the Battle of Nexus Point, the galaxy learned what it meant when humans became involved in a conflict. The news traveled through hyperspace communication networks at the speed of quantum entanglement, carrying a message that would reshape the balance of power across known space. Commander Zextai stood in the communications center of the Times' Eternal Resolve *, watching in amazement as reports flooded in from across the Coalition's outer territories. Kethvar forces that had seemed unstoppable just days earlier were now retreating in chaos, their formations broken and their technological superiority meaningless. "Sir," Communications Specialist Rixoba announced, his voice filled with barely contained excitement. "I'm receiving confirmations from 17 different sectors. Kethvar fleets are in full retreat. Multiple reports of unknown vessels providing precision support to Coalition forces." Unknown vessels? Small, single-pilot fighters matching the configuration of Sergeant Chen's ship. They appear without warning, eliminate key Kethvar targets, then disappear before our forces can establish contact. Intelligence Officer Velmar looked up from her analysis station, her scaled features showing a mixture of admiration and concern. "Commander, I'm tracking engagement patterns across the affected sectors. The attacks are too coordinated to be coincidental. This represents a systematic military operation." Zextai studied the tactical displays, recognizing the signature precision that had saved his fleet at Nexus Point. But the scale was enormous. If similar interventions were happening across 17 sectors simultaneously, it meant, "How many human operatives are we talking about?" he asked. "Unknown, sir. The ships appear to operate independently, but the timing suggests coordinated command structure. Conservative estimates would place the number in the hundreds, possibly thousands." Lieutenant Jorhan activated the holographic display, showing the galaxy-wide tactical situation. Red indicators that had marked Kethvar-controlled territory were rapidly shifting to yellow and green as alien forces retreated or were destroyed. "Sir, there's something else. I'm detecting massive energy signatures moving through hyperspace toward the outer rim. The configurations don't match any known ship designs, but the power levels are enormous." Before Zextai could respond, his personal communicator activated with Sergeant Chen's voice. "Commander, this is Chen. Request immediate conference with your command staff. Priority Alpha. Granted. Conference Room 7. 20 minutes later, Chen stood before the assembled Coalition officers, but she was no longer alone. 2 other humans had joined her, both wearing the same black flight suits and carrying themselves with the same quiet confidence that marked Chen as something beyond normal military personnel. "Commander Zextai," Chen began, "I'd like you to meet Captain Marcus Rodriguez and Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Park. They represent different aspects of human military operations." Captain Rodriguez was a tall man with graying temples and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of his surroundings. Lieutenant Colonel Park was shorter, with Asian features and an expression of calm intensity that reminded Zextai of Chen herself. "The situation has escalated beyond my original mission parameters," Chen continued. "Human Command has authorized limited intervention to evaluate Coalition strategic potential." "Limited intervention?" Velmar asked. "Our reports suggest massive human operations across multiple sectors. From your perspective, yes. From ours, this represents a minor deployment of reconnaissance assets. The Kethvar response to increased human activity has been instructive." Captain Rodriguez stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making life and death decisions. "Commander, we need to discuss the strategic situation. The Kethvar aren't just retreating. They're regrouping for something much larger." "What do you mean?" Lieutenant Colonel Park activated a portable holographic projector, displaying a 3-dimensional map that showed Kethvar fleet movements across the entire galactic sector. Our long-range surveillance assets have detected massive force concentrations building in 3 separate locations. Ship counts suggest they're mobilizing their entire military capability. For what purpose? Total war, Chen said simply. The HFY have dominated this region through limited engagements and psychological warfare. Our interventions have demonstrated that their technological advantages can be neutralized. They're adapting by preparing to deploy overwhelming numerical superiority. Zextai felt his heart sink as he studied the tactical projections. The enemy fleet concentrations were enormous, representing thousands of vessels far beyond anything the coalition could hope to match. When? He asked. Approximately 14 standard rotations, Rodriguez replied. They're consolidating forces from across their territory. When they move, it will be with everything they have. Can the coalition survive such an assault? The 3 humans exchanged glances before Chen responded. Not with current capabilities and tactical doctrine. The mathematical probabilities are unfavorable regardless of human support levels. Then what do you suggest? That depends on how serious you are about winning this war, Park said. Half measures and defensive thinking will only delay the inevitable. If you want to survive, you need to be willing to change everything about how you approach warfare. Jorhan leaned forward. What kind of changes? Fundamental ones. Your military doctrine is based on conventional engagement patterns that the HFY can easily counter. You fight like civilized beings following established rules. They fight like the apex predators they are, using every advantage without regard for convention or morality. Chen activated additional displays showing human tactical frameworks. Human military philosophy is based on a simple principle. The enemy's strengths become irrelevant if you refuse to fight the battle they want to fight. Meaning, instead of trying to match their fleet strength, you make their fleets irrelevant. Instead of defending fixed positions, you make fixed positions meaningless. Instead of fighting for territory, you fight for the ability to deny them everything they need. Rodriguez pointed to specific areas on the tactical map. The HFY depend on resource flows from conquered territories to maintain their war machine. Their technology requires rare materials that must be extracted from specific planetary types. Their ships need maintenance facilities and supply chains, just like yours do. You're suggesting we target their infrastructure rather than their fleets, Zextai realized. Infrastructure, supply lines, command networks, resource production facilities make it impossible for them to sustain military operations, regardless of how many ships they have, Park added. But this requires fundamental changes to coalition military structure. You need forces capable of operating independently behind enemy lines for extended periods. You need commanders willing to make strategic sacrifices for tactical advantages, and you need to accept casualties that conventional warfare wouldn't require. Velmar looked troubled. Casualties? Asymmetric warfare is expensive in lives and resources, Chen explained. Human doctrine accepts losses that other species might consider unacceptable because we understand that the alternative is extinction. If you're not willing to pay that price, then conventional defeat might be preferable to unconventional victory. The conference room fell silent as the coalition officers contemplated the implications. Everything the humans were describing went against established coalition military traditions that emphasized minimizing casualties and protecting civilian populations. There's another consideration, Rodriguez said. If you adopt human tactical doctrine, you become something different than you were before. Species that embrace asymmetric warfare tend to develop cultural characteristics that reflect those choices. You might win the war and lose who you are as civilizations. But if we don't change, Zextai asked, then the HFY win, and the question becomes irrelevant. Chen stepped to the center of the room, her dark eyes reflecting the weight of decisions that would affect billions of lives. Human Command has authorized me to make a proposal. We will provide limited direct support and extensive tactical training to coalition forces willing to adopt modified human doctrine. In return, the coalition provides intelligence on HFY capabilities and access to strategic resources. What kind of support? 50 human operatives with full equipment packages. Advanced sensor technology that can track phase-shifted vessels. Weapon modifications that can penetrate HFY defenses. And most importantly, training in tactical approaches that the Kethvar won't expect. Park activated another display showing training scenarios and equipment specifications. But understand the commitment you're making. Human tactical doctrine requires absolute dedication and willingness to sacrifice conventional thinking. Half measures will get everyone killed. How long would such training take? Jorhan asked. For basic competency, 6 standard rotations. For advanced operations, 12 to 18 months. But we don't have that much time before the Kethvar offensive begins. Then what do you propose? Accelerated integration, Rodriguez said. Human operators paired with coalition units. Your people learn by doing rather than through extended classroom instruction. It's dangerous and expensive, but it's the only way to achieve operational capability in the available timeframe. Chen moved to the tactical display, highlighting key strategic points across coalition space. We've identified 47 targets that would significantly degrade Kethvar operational capability if successfully destroyed. Some are heavily defended industrial facilities. Others are isolated supply depots. A few are command centers that coordinate their regional operations. You want us to conduct simultaneous strikes across their entire territory? Coordinated strikes designed to create maximum disruption during their mobilization phase. If we can force them to divert resources to defensive operations, their offensive capability becomes significantly reduced. Zextai studied the proposed targets, recognizing the audacity of what the humans were suggesting. It would require coalition forces to operate far beyond their established comfort zones, taking risks that would have been unthinkable just rotations earlier. The casualties will be significant, Chen acknowledged, but not as significant as the casualties from conventional defeat. This gives you a chance to win. Nothing else does. The coalition officers debated for hours, weighing impossible choices against unacceptable alternatives. Finally, Zextai called for silence. Sergeant Chen, he said formally, the coalition accepts your proposal. We request immediate commencement of tactical integration and target preparation. Understood, Commander. Fair warning. This is going to be unlike anything your forces have experienced before. Human warfare doesn't leave room for traditional concepts of honor or conventional rules of engagement. Are you prepared for that reality? Zextai thought of the millions of civilians in the core worlds who would die if the Kethvar offensive succeeded. He thought of entire civilizations that would be consumed by an enemy that viewed sentient life as nothing more than resources to be harvested. We're prepared to do whatever is necessary. Chen smiled for the first time since they had met, and Zextai realized he was looking at the expression of an apex predator who had finally found worthy allies. Then let's teach the galaxy's former top predators what it means to be prey. Over the following rotations, coalition forces underwent the most intensive transformation in their military history. Human doctrine spread through their ranks like controlled wildfire, changing not just tactics but fundamental assumptions about warfare itself. When the Kethvar offensive finally came, they found themselves facing an enemy that had learned to think like humans. The galaxy's apex predators discovered that there was something worse than being hunted. Being hunted by creatures who refused to acknowledge that they were supposed to be prey.